Hello, I think most of you know who I am. I'm Pinky Marsh. I'm the man with the rodeo plan. Make a long story short, I went to Lee Jensen in January of 2007. Only because I wanted to put a bathroom in. I first went to the health department. Health department wanted to know what I needed a bathroom in on the backside of my farm. I told them it was because women would be trail riding back there, and I didn't want them to be exposed. And I was willing to spend the money to put a bathroom in. And they asked me what my project was. I told them I was going to build an agricultural park. And I told them I was going to teach kids to invent a rodeo, have trail riding, teach kids how to ride horses, race horses. You know, I had everything in mind. Kids could show horses, do everything pertaining to agriculture. They said, that sounds like a pretty big project. I said, yeah, it is. They said, are you zoned for that? I said, that's agriculture. They said, maybe you need to talk to Lee Jensen, zoning administrator. I went to talk to Mr. Lee. Lee Jensen told me, he said, that's agriculture, we really don't have any authority over it. But if you would, that's a pretty big project. He said, if you would, said, talk to Dick Black, planning administrator. I went and talked to Dick Black. Dick Black said they didn't have any authority. Said, but he was going to talk to Lee again for me to go back and see Lee in a couple of days. When I went back to see Lee Jensen told me, he said, Pinky, we really don't have any way to regulate you. But you know the problem we got into with Walmart? I said, yeah. He said, you got three choices. He said, you can just start operating and take your chances, or you can deed out 25 acres of your property to your son, and you would own all the land around it. And then when it come before the Board of Adjustment, nobody would know anything about it except for you, and they wouldn't get a letter. He said you could do it that way, or you could just go at it and notify all the neighbors. I looked at him, he said, would there be anybody against it? I said, if there are, it'll be racial. He said, well, if anything racial comes up, they're trained for that. And said, I promise you they'll kick that right out and you'll get whatever you ask for. Well, I asked him, I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, well, to protect the county, if you would, apply for the permit. So that started hell now. I'm going to tell you what, that started hell with our family, but we were trying to protect the county. Not that anybody had any authority, but the county had done admitted they didn't have any, but if I would, and he was going to help me. But Lee Jensen did help me. He told me who to go hire. He helped me fill the permit out, tell me what to do, and that, right here the permit says saddle clubs, rodeo and horse event, train horses and kids events of rodeo and trail riding. Okay? It was filled out for me and my mother. My mother also signed it. Okay. All right. I fill out that permit. Lee Jensen tells me who to hire. I even had to hire Margaret Desio with Carolina Appraisers. She loved the idea too. But as this thing went on, I began to see something wasn't exactly right. On April the 2nd, 2007, the board members, and I'm going to read them off, was Chairman Brian Rogers, Vice Chairman was Jimmy Benton Sr., ever how you pronounce his last name, Ada Miles, Walt David, Janet Hall, James Webb, and James Barnett were there April the 2nd. But let's go back to the March meeting, because that's the first meeting I showed up at. The March meeting is the first one I showed up at, and they were, all of a sudden, I had all this opposition against me. I knew nothing about any opposition. Brian Rogers realized that I was caught by surprise with all these people showing up, so he gave us 15 minutes to talk. In this speech, I told him basically what I was going to do, and I said, really, I'm here just, to do what the county asked me to do, and that they directed me to do this, and that I really didn't have to be here at all because it was agriculture. But I'm not trying to hide or pull anything over on them. Well, in that 15 minutes, a guy by the name of Jerry Sutton, I want all of you to understand who Jerry Sutton is now. Jerry Sutton is the first person to ever threaten me. He told me, he said, you'll be hearing from my attorney tomorrow. I said, please tell him to call me. Jerry Sutton is married to Marion Cox, his niece, by the way. I never got that phone call from the attorney, and Jerry Sutton never showed up at another Board of Adjustment meeting. But he was the one that threatened me with the lawsuit. Okay, then we get to, it was continued. The vote from March meeting was continued to the April meeting, the meeting, because Nancy Preston requested it. All it takes is one request and automatically they get an extension. So it was put off to the April meeting. Well, we've been advertising Plaza de Toros Rio Grande coming soon since December on a Spanish radio station. So we've done our advertising, we've done all our work. To make a long story short, I'll go back into all the political people and everybody later. But this meeting, this particular video right here is directly to the Board of Adjustment of 2007. In that meeting, I was the first one to speak, and I presented my evidence to Brian Rogers. And we're actually going to scan this and put it on out there for you to see, because most of the board members were not allowed to see it. I handed it over to Brian Rogers. If y'all remember, I had to leave the meeting just a minute because he was determined I was going to tell him how we were going to do security. But here's a letter right here from Frank Dees, who was the mayor of Marshville. I want you to read this letter. So I'm going to make sure it gets scanned and put out here, okay? Here's a letter right here requesting Plaza de Toros Rio Grande from Carolina Wood Products because they work a bunch of Hispanic people. Here's a letter right here from Southern States. The manager at Southern States there in Monroe told me, said they'd had a meeting and said that in their meeting they told them that one group of people that would spend a lot of money for agriculture was Hispanic people and wanted them to key towards those Hispanic people. So this is from Southern States. This right here was a petition signed by business people, okay? There's a couple of them on here from Anson County, one from Polkton and one from Peachland, I think. but all the rest of them were from Marshville or Monroe in Union County, Wingate, requesting that this business be allowed to operate. Now here's the one that I'm going to read to you, and I want you to see it. I want you to look at this letter. This is from Jerry Simpson. In this letter, he says, hopefully you are aware that agriculture in Union County generates nearly $1 billion to the county's economy each year. Dr. Michael Walden, North Carolina State University economist, estimated that the income and the employment represented over 20% of the county's total gross population. Despite a rapid urbanization occurring in our county, Union County ranked third in the 100 counties in our state in agriculture, despite the fact an increase in population is and will change the face of agriculture as we know it. Agritourism is the latest, and you remember this is 2007. Agritourism is the latest effort to allow agriculture and urbanization to coexist. Our urban population is hungry for family entertainment and opportunity to connect to the land. Mr. Pinky Marsh understands these changes and that the opportunities they can provide in generating sales tax for our community and sustainability for our agriculture and open space. Please accept this letter as my recommendation in support of his effort to provide an excellent family-oriented tourism destination in Marshville. Sincerely, Jerry Simpson, Union County Extension Director. Folks, I want to tell y'all, through this whole deal, I went to Jerry Simpson and asked him to come down to my farm. I asked him, I said, Jerry, I said, I want you to come and look and see what I'm building. And I said, when I'm through with it, if you'll put an agriculture fair together for the county, I'll give it to you. Now, Jerry Simpson's going to have to testify to that. I told him, I will give the facility. Now, I'm not just giving you the land, but you know, when you need it, you got it. I would make every effort for anybody that would actually generate funds, because I had my goal of what I wanted to do, but I was building this facility so everybody could have it. But you know, y'all remember, the board members remember Mr. Brian Rogers demanding I have a way to do security. And he said, we won't vote tonight until you have that security in place. So you remember I left the meeting, walked out. When I came back in, I walked to Brian Rogers and I held this paper up like this right here. And I said, Mr. Rogers, we really didn't want to give this to you tonight. I said, because we thought we would keep it on a positive note. I said, but you insisted, so here it is. And I gave him this letter. Remember, he looked at it and he handed it to Jim Benton. The rest of y'all didn't get to see it. But I'm going to read it to you because this letter was okayed by the police chief in Marshville. Zach Howard lived across the road from me, and he worked for the police department in town. And he said, "Dear Board of Adjustment, I am one of the police officers who will be in charge of security along with the police chief of Marshville." Now you remember the police chief okayed this. "The security in these events will be some of the best this county has to offer, along with Union County Sheriff's Office. We will not only have Union County deputies walking the crowd, we plan to also have Union County Mounted Patrol. Ladies and gentlemen, I live in this community and I know what is being taught. This has everything to do with racial profiling at its worst. Sincerely, Zach Howard, Lanford Road, Marshville, North Carolina." And y'all wasn't allowed to see this, were you? Well, you also remember Jerry Marsh walked up to Brian Rogers when his wife went and sat down. His wife sat down at the table, and Jerry Marsh walked up there with a manila folder like this and handed it to Brian Rogers. Now I got a question. What was on that, in that manila folder? Are any of you board members interested in what was in that folder yet? But the meeting lasted so long with all the lies and manipulation with everybody and trying to discredit me and ruin my credibility, do everything you could against me. My neighbors were doing it. Even though there's not a one of those neighbors, well, they are. There's a couple of them that I hadn't ever helped. They're new to the neighborhood. But anybody that had lived there 20 years can't say that I haven't helped them. Now they're ashamed of themselves. So this meeting went so long that the vote was put off to the May meeting. And you remember Brian Rogers said no one would be allowed to speak except for myself. And I had to bring some documentation back. One of them was, this is the list. I had to talk to the sheriff. I had to have a contract with the sheriff, which is no such thing. I found that out because the sheriff told me. I had to have a contract with the Porter-John people. Okay. Said I had to have a check with the DOT about the driveway entrance. Scott Cole. Let's see. I must check with the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources Office in Mooresville with grading work. You remember Steve Gregg tried to say I built all this illegal. Well, I went to see Scott Cole. And when I went to see Scott Cole, I talked to a gentleman, Chad Austin. Scott wasn't in. And we finally got a meeting. When I finally talked to Scott Cole, he just looked at me and told me that I was going to have a turning lane. He knew it wasn't possible to put a turning lane in on this road. I didn't own the other side. Besides, this road that entered my property was over 100 years old. It happened to be an old wagon trail to Marshville. Okay, so nobody could take this road away from me. But Scott Cole threatened me with tearing this road out in a letter. And when I got it, I went to Larry Helms. Told Larry, I had to fax it to Larry. He was on his way to Raleigh. He was going to take care of it. So he said, we're going to rewrite the letter. Thank you. And said, we'll do it in time for your meeting. Well, I ended up with two letters from Scott Cole that y'all didn't get to see. So we're gonna make sure that they get get scanned so y'all get to look at them. along with the information that I gave Larry Helms. It'll also be scanned and put out there for you to see. But on this Board of Adjustment meeting that night, there was Brian Rogers, chairman, Jimmy Benson, vice chairman, Ada Miles, David Walt, Janet Hall, James Webb, Bill Ladd, and James Barnett. Okay? So all of you remember those names, because if anybody sees this video, call them and ask them if I'm lying. Did they get to see all this information? I had to bring a letter back from Sheriff Cathy. So here was my letter from Sheriff Cathy. Sheriff Cathy, when I went to him, he said, what in the heck are they asking for? He said, there's no such thing. You can provide your own security. There's no such thing as the Sheriff Department has to provide the security. So there's another rule that the Board of Adjustment was making up as it went along. Here was my porta-john from Mr. Carl Hildreth. Had to have a porta-john letter. Here was the second letter from Scott Cole. He says the waiver is valid for Saturday and Sunday only. So now the DOT is going to regulate my business on agriculture. I'll have to explain that to you in a little bit too. I mean at a later date. Okay? And y'all remember that they said there was a guy from